There you go.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Well, a little bit of housekeeping first. First of all, welcome community members, existing and new. If you're a new member, double thank you. We're trying to spread the word and let everybody know about, what's going on in M365. The whole point is to proliferate the awareness, to gather all the enthusiasts, all the professionals, to talk about what's going on in the world of Microsoft, in the world of Microsoft Cloud, and specifically Microsoft 365 environment. This community is for networking, to share solutions, to share experiences, to share your stories, all related to Microsoft 365. I would like to kind of mention that, we kind of are gathered here in our personal capacities. So the opinions that we all express may or may not be aligned with the opinions of the organizations that we represent. So it's just an FYI. As far as community standards go, they're very simple. Please be respectful to other members. I mean, that is a given. Do not share proprietary or other non-public information. Feel free to share, relevant, information, but kind of try to not to make it too salesy. Community organizers, which we would mention who those people are, reserve the right to moderate, but generally we don't because people obey community standards. We very rarely have any issues related to that. I wanted to mention those community organizers. One of them is me, Andrew Kagan. I'm with Planet Technologies, Andy Oak, my esteemed colleague. And one person who we actually miss on this call very, very much, Nick Giard. Unfortunately, he has other obligations and could not attend, but he's usually emceeing and doing much better work than I'm doing right now. We're going to miss him dearly, but hopefully he's going to join us in a follow-up event next month. Hopefully you guys are familiar with the Microsoft Teams platform, but if not, just take a very quick look at the screen in front of you. You definitely have the buttons to enable your mic, to enable your camera, to raise your hand, to post a message. Andy and I will be monitoring the message channel and chat channel, and if need be, we'll be finding good time to insert those questions coming from the audience to make sure that the panel addresses them. Also, on occasion, we can definitely enable a mic. You can ask your question yourself by all means. That's not an issue either. Just to remember those community standards. And with that, I am extremely pleased about the event that we're doing tonight. It's a little different from many of the previous events we have done. We're not going to be dwelling on, kind of technical demos or PowerPoint presentations. That's a reason for excitement for me. It's going to be very conversational. We hope it's going to be very interactive. So please do ask questions. And the whole point is to have two esteemed guests who are gathered here, who graciously accepted our invitation. Sanjay Koyani, who is the CTO at the Department of Labor, and Oki Mek, who is the CISO of Microsoft Federal Civilian Business. And they will be talking about Sanjay's vision for innovation and kind of his career in technology, generally speaking. So I'm super excited. I already seen the highlights. Don't want to spoil it for anybody. And I'm sure it's going to be a great talk. That said, if you guys don't mind, I'll just pass it on to you.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you so much. Happy Wednesday afternoon, everyone. I know it's late in the day, so hopefully we'll keep you awake throughout the session. If you do have questions, I do have a series of questions for Sanjay, but if you have questions, feel free to enter in the chat, and Andrew and Andy will kind of monitor that and ping me. So we have a special guest today. He's a friend of mine and a former colleague. Being at FDA over 9 years, was also an HSS executive director for innovation over 7 years. He was actually HSS acting CTO when the transition happened, the political transition happened. I think that if Sanjay was a political appointee, he would have got that position. I thought he did an amazing job with that office while he was acting role. A lot of innovative works, a lot of mission-oriented, working closely with the Secretary's office. And now he's the DOL, Department of Labor CTO. So welcome, Sanjay Koyani. Welcome to M365 Meetup.
Great, thank you, Oki. I appreciate it. And first of all, I'm very honored to have been invited. I appreciate folks' times. 5 to 6 is a rough time frame to be coming to anything where, if you're like me, you've got many obligations and you're just barely getting past your work to probably get to later on in the evening. So I appreciate the time.
Yeah, definitely. But first, I do want to congratulate you on the Stevie Award for Technology Executive of the Year. I think that was 2 months ago, a month ago, Sanjay. So congratulations.
Thank you, Oki. I appreciate it. I'm not sure where this came from, but I appreciate whoever put me in for that.
Yeah, I thought you well deserved. It's a combination of all the work that you have done in the federal space. Actually, your entire career in the federal space. I think you did some amazing job there. So the scope of this discussion will be around harnessing IT to empower mission in the public sector. So Sanjay, having devoted a pretty much your entire career to the public sector, and thank you for your service, by the way. Can you share your experience within the federal government and what drives your dedication to the public mission?
Thank you, Oki. I do have to return the compliment though. Like Oki, I worked with him at HHS. He is. I have to tell you that some of the best strategic conversations I've had have been with Oki. So if you have not sat down with him on positioning, he even career-wise, I'm always pulling out my notebook and saying, okay, that's a fantastic idea, but when it comes to how you think about positioning and sequencing things, I've learned a lot from Oki. So enough with that. Oki, thank you. It seems like it has been a long time in the public sector, and I would say that a lot of my career has been driven by just keeping an open mind. Like I came out of graduate school with a master's in public health, a focus on healthcare and how you create innovation and change in that space. And I look back now and I see that a lot of my work throughout the federal sphere has been really driven by mission and how that's aligned with IT. That's been a big enabler. And if you guys will just bear with me, let me talk to you a little bit about my journey in the federal side, because it wasn't really what I had planned or predicted. But here I find myself years later and having been across a number of different areas. So when I joined after I finished graduate school, I came to Health and Human Services, which is it's the largest federal cabinet level agency. The budget's 1.3 trillion. At least when I was there, I know it's exploded since then with COVID and other areas, but it's the prime agency for healthcare, public health science, all that good stuff. The National Institutes of Health, which is the largest biomedical research organization in the world, and funds all the research and around cancer and heart disease and so forth. They brought me in to help drive some of their public health work, and around that time, the web had come out, and what was happening then is people who had the budgets were basically just, I'll just add that to my portfolio. I'll put it in the media shop. I'll put it in the administrative shop, which is working fine, but we started to see more and more people, the researchers, the public that was desperate for some of this latest research information for themselves or loved ones from ever, was just getting very frustrated with. I used to be able to get this information that you would mail out. I used to be able to get this information to your call centers. All this stuff is going digital, and I can't find this stuff. And they were getting very frustrated and upset about all of it. And so they're like, Sanjay, you're young. You're going to be our new web guy. And I did take over that function. One thing I got with a group that was really looking at user experience and human factors and how do you bring that in to really drive forward that kind of work. And so before I knew it, I'd kind of fallen into being the user experience human factors guy for the National Institutes of Health. And we started using that to turn around, how do you focus things based on the top tasks users needs? What are the performance objectives we're going after? And then how do you match that with some of the preference and satisfaction efforts? IBM was doing this, Microsoft was doing this. There's a lot of work that's already been happening in the private sector, not as much in the public sector. So we really started bringing in those harder principles into government and driving it. And long story short, after doing some really cool things in there, word started getting around federal government about the work we were doing, the way we were measuring and tracking KPIs and other data, bringing in users to really test their experiences, whether it was looking for cancer research information or researchers looking for where they could apply for elements, that we were getting requests from across all the federal government to come in and talk about user experience and how they could really impact federal, you know, the federal design. I remember when Department of Homeland Security just got established, and they were looking to understand how are we going to be responding to this whole new cabinet level agency. And one of the big things at the time was anthrax, where they were getting these letters coming out, and they were trying to deliver information over the web around how you could respond if you got a suspicious package. The user experience was so god awful. And I remember coming in and us even just bringing in some users and doing some initial testing, and they were in awe of this fact that you could design something early, bring in users, test it out, and you could see how miserably they could do find any of this information before abandoning their work. And so as their name kind of got out there, the headquarters, Department of Health and Human Services, grabbed my group, plucked us out, put us in headquarters, and said, "You've got 6 months to redesign our HHS.gov website. So this is the front door to all of, you know, FDA, CDC, National Institutes of Health, all the big brands." And they didn't even really ask. This unit shouldn't be just being one of our divisions. It needs to, or one of our agencies. It needs to be back at headquarters. And so from there, I got to revamp the entire Health and Human Services website. They also used that to get funding to establish the department's first cross HHS web communications division that would govern all of the digital assets and properties that were happening out there. I got a chance to establish the first user experience group at Health and Human Services. Again, my background was in human factors, just because of the interest in how this could advance the mission and how it could improve IT. I just leaned in wholly, and then we worked with some of the best experts out there, both public, private sector, to drive this stuff. Again, it became so big that I was able to start the federal government's first usability website, usability.gov, which would start to bring in a lot of the practices and principles around performance and satisfaction and the tools to do personas and everything else related with it. That experience became so it was really successful. So the Food and Drug Administration tapped me and said, "We want you to come over here and bring that to the Food and Drug Administration." And the Food and Drug Administration is the largest regulatory body, I believe, in the world. That 25 cents of every dollar is spent on regulating the food and drug is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. So the blood supply, the food supply, all the medical products, the medical devices, and so forth. And when I came there, the entire agency was really focused on pushing things out based on their programs. We're the Center for Foods, we're the Center for Devices. Where it was an absolute disaster as to how they were delivering their information. And so when they tapped me and brought me in, I met with each of the different centers and I explained to them the vision, and they all said, "Thank you, but no thanks. We've got our own servers. We like what we're doing here. Might have worked for you back at headquarters, but you're not at headquarters anymore. This ain't, we like find what we're doing." And so, I mean, every place I've gone, culture has really been the driver. If you don't get the culture right, technology is the easy part, and it always has been. You got to get the technology, you got to get good technical professionals, but it's the people and the process that you really have to drive there. So I remember at that experience having to really wear the hat of a communications person and going to the commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration saying, "Dr. von Eschenbach, your legacy has got to be not changing the web, not changing our infrastructure. It's going to be, how do we create this global touch point for all of food and drug information? We're getting killed out there by industry and others saying FDA is working too slow. It's not putting out enough information. Your legacy will be us transforming how this global touch point will for FDA information is going to get transformed. People don't come into the office. They don't get a chance to meet you and shake your hand normally. But this is your touch point for doing all that." And so I drafted up the note, sent it to him. He loved it. And this was one where people were starting to move, but you needed the stick. The commissioner sent this out to all of the center directors. This is my legacy. This is where I want to go. I want to make sure people can actually actively use and get to our information. And we're going to have metrics behind it and numbers to show that we've gone from when I first got to the FDA website and we defined the top tasks, both by our leaders inside as well as the public, we were at a 40% success rate on average. I think the satisfaction rate was around just around 50, but half the time people were like, well, it's because I'm stupid. It's not because you guys created a bad website. It's on me. It's not you. Again, this is looking at core things like I need to report report a recall, or I need to find if something's been recalled because there's a nut allergy in ice cream that was pushed out. I need to find out if a new drug has been approved. I need to know if how I can get my new drug application onto the marketplace because it's going to improve public health, but I've got to show that safety, efficacy, balance. Everybody was struggling to get through this stuff. Industry, health professionals, the public. And then this is what you do. You get the resources to determine, based on the audiences that we have to go after in this 40% start rate, how are we going to little by little get that up to a better percentage? You never reach 100, but on at least these top tasks, how'd you get that up to the next sets of usability tests with our users and continuing to refine, design, and develop it out? You get to from 40 to 55 and then 55 to 60 and so forth. But it becomes really important that you're framing out how the top and the bottom are going to work together to help you drive this thing through. And so that became a really successful effort. I promise, I'll wrap this up. But that experience there, very happy at the FDA serving as the director. I also helped kick off the first digital social media properties, their Facebook and Twitter and other profiles. Around this time, CDC tapped FDA and said, we want to kick off this practice at CDC. We're going to do it bigger. This is a remit from our director at the time. And so they wanted me to come over there and help them stand it up, which I agreed to do for several months. Got that kicked off. It was fascinating to see that culture, what was happening in Atlanta, what some of the different areas of focus are there. I mean, this is an agency that looks at how do we stop infectious diseases from coming into working with our states to coming into the U.S. and then how do we set up institutions across the globe? Because the best way to stop it is at the point of entry, which is in Africa and China and India and these other places. And so I got a chance to come down there and do that again. Didn't necessarily want to be the user experience person, but it was a really good chance to help them set up that practice. FDA at the time got the authority during Obama to regulate tobacco for the first time anywhere in the world. And so they tried once before, it got denied in court. They took a second swag at it, got the authority to regulate tobacco before then any tobacco product could get in the market. They tapped me to come help them stand up the center. It went from 0 to 800. The funding for the Center of Tobacco Products was fully funded by industry. And that was the agreement they reached. And I think some of the larger tobacco industry members were like, look, one way for us to get rid of all these small players is for us to agree to this legislation, because they won't be able to keep up with the regulations, and we'll be able to further consolidate space, especially as you're going towards more smokeless tobacco. So, or to more nicotine delivery devices that weren't combustible tobacco. So got a chance to come back. They pulled me back in. I helped them stand up the center. What was interesting here is that they wanted me to serve as the deputy director for communications. And so while I wasn't formally have a background in that area, IT was going to be a strong driver, but also how do you create multi-million-dollar public education campaigns to get teens and young adults to not smoke? That was central to the legislation, the Family Tobacco Control Act. And the core goal there was we need you to help us set up a communications office from scratch. And the way I designed it out was there'll be a corporate communications arm. There's going to be your traditional federal government. Here's what we're doing. Here's a press releases, the normal stuff that we do. And then a much larger, upwards of 60-something people, which is running large public education campaigns with big media campaigns focused on behavior change. So this wasn't getting people to do, to do an action here or there. It's like, fundamentally, how do you change behavior change? And how do you convince the department to allow us to run things through clearance that you can't wait on a tweet on using some of the social media platforms that 12 to 17-year-olds are using? And so when we need approval for those platforms, number two, we can't wait for you to clear the messages. Usually, typically, everything got cleared through public affairs. So all these things are on how do you really shift that and get these education campaigns out there and demonstrate impact as 8% of the budget. That I think we were first campaign that said contracts went out for close to 400 million, and 8% of that had to go towards evaluating the impact of behavior change and demonstrating that you actually had you did what you were going to do with this audience. From there, I got tapped by Health and Human Services again at the cabinet level agency, where they were starting to under the Obama administration, they had started a whole entrepreneurship program. This is where kind of the role that I met you at Oki. They had started up a CTO, but they said this is going to be unlike any other CTO. This is an entrepreneur in residence. We want to get people out of Silicon Valley. They're going to set up a mindset and approach at a large, sprawling cabinet level agency to fundamentally change how it approaches problems. And we're going to start bringing in design thinking, user-centered design, and we're going to start also seeding new approaches to old problems through a venture capital fund, through an Ignite accelerator that gets the best ideas, trains people up in design thinking, and then seeds money towards the best creative healthcare projects that are fully supported by the major arms of the department, National Institutes of Health, the CDC, FDA, and they would often give the seed funding if through a Shark Tank environment, best ideas came through, people were trained up, and if their early ideas demonstrated value, then they would go into the venture capital fund, get additional funding to then operationalize it with some level of resources. And often we would entice entrepreneurs to come in and join the federal government for a period of time to help drive and advance it. And so I got a chance to then switch over to more of an innovation Silicon Valley type hat, learn a lot of those ideas and principles. Part of the reason why they wanted me there too is that they're like, look, Sanjay's a smart guy. He's been around the block here at HHS. We are getting now at the point where in the next year and a half, we're going to be winding down this administration, whether it's the Hillary campaign or the Trump campaign. We need this stuff to transition. It's been a huge impact at the department. We want to keep innovation going. We want to keep these entrepreneurial approaches going. They've done a whole bunch of stuff with open data, and we're going to keep this is in place. And so I helped them now to close out the year and a half, but then and working with the politicals, but also and the federal staff, but then also transitioning it successfully when Trump administration came in. What is this? This is tied to the old administration. Made the case. They added some new additional flavors to it and used it to kick off some accelerators around kidney, Lyme disease, a number of areas that had stagnated in healthcare, and that they were bringing in through prize competitions, new entrepreneurs to take a swag at old problems and see if they could kickstart things like artificial kidneys and other areas that I think that it like kidney dialysis is like 1% of Medicare's budget, which is huge because it just hasn't had any new ideas and how they approach the problem. So kicking off a lot of that. The other thing that really was interesting during that time and in keeping this kind of open mind and using mission to drive technology, this is where I got to actually work with Oki. The administration came in and said, look, we want to spend 2 weeks, which I thought was really a heads up move. We want to spend 2 weeks bringing together all of the leaders across the Department of Health and Human Services. And we're going to, in facilitated sessions, identify our top 10 pivots that if we could make a change to how we operate government at Health and Human Services, they would have the largest impact. So we had Deloitte descend on the department. They had gotten the contract. We brought together these leaders, a lot of design thinking and sessions. The interesting facet that came out of the 2 weeks of work, number one theme across all 10 groups was data. The department is data rich and information poor. We're sitting on mounds of data, healthcare data, public health data, research data, regulatory data, and we are not using this to solve our most pressing issues. And so I got a chance to actually lead 2 of the 10 Reimagine initiatives. The first was optimizing regional performance. Health and Human Services has 10 regional offices located across the country. About a fourth of their workforce hadn't been assessed collectively since '67 when Nixon they kicked off these regional offices. Again, what do I know about the regions? What do I know about how we could align them better with with headquarters? I had to come up with a strategy, design out how do we do this, and then go out to all 10 regions with a group that all thought this administration was just going to cut them. How do we cut government? How do we cut the regions? And what I led with is, look, if you want me to go out there, actually meet the groups and get information on what's working, what's not working, where can we make improvements, whether it's alignment with mission, the amount of space needed to do the work, the IT needed to enable them to do their mission better. I'm your guy. If it's things are already decided, I'm not your person. And so with that agreement, went out and got a chance to really look at how we could optimize the regions, pulled together reports for the 10 regional offices. And there's 10 HHS divisions that work in those 10 regional offices. So pulling that together, and very much focused on leading with mission, leading with the shared understanding, leading with almost like user-centered design. Where are you guys seeing the opportunities, and using that as a North Star for how we improved it? And we were able to actually save some really good money across the regions just by getting the data, analyzing it, and then working with them to implement new solutions. I think got pushed over to the Data Insights Initiative, which was how do you get the data from the department to make better decision making, and that effort to look at how do you start to create a more centralized place where data from across the department could come together, and without taking these large agency information, but still finding a place to be able to bring it together, because you had our Secretary for Health come in, and I'm looking at us saying, look, hey Sanjay, I think it's great you're looking at how to create an integrated data warehouse for some of this work, but he's like, it's much larger than that, which required us to go much larger. He's like, I'm coming in being asked to solve the opioid epidemic. I'm being asked to solve COVID. I've been here 8 months now, and I have no idea what data exists at the department to do that. And now that I know it exists, they won't give it to me. Food and Drug Administration can't give it to me because of data use agreements. CDC can't give it to me because of data use agreements. CMS, I got to pay for that data, and they still won't give it to me. So he's like, this is like what you're creating here is Disneyland, man. I need to know what exists, and I need ways to get to it. And that's where we started broadening the whole component around what are really the factors that are keeping us from sharing data, and how do we then create opportunities to force data sharing, even with the deputy secretary coming out and saying, look, I want all of your opioid data from these core agencies, and tell me why you can't share it. And then let's get through the myths of why, and the realities of why you can and can't share it. And so I was able to lead that one. I'll close out by saying I was looking at my next opportunity. Quite frankly, I was looking at the private sector. DOL kind of came out of nowhere, tapped me, and asked me to come over as their CTO. I took that job because I thought it was really fascinating to look at a whole new cabinet level agency. They're the only cabinet level agency that has now shifted to a complete IT shared service environment. And what they asked me to do is to come over and to stand up 3 core areas. One was data services. DOL is even further behind on its data strategy, and how do we enable us becoming a data-led, data-driven organization. The second was on emerging technologies, stand up an emerging tech office. How do we then use AI to drive impact and value? How do we start operationalizing robotic process automation to really drive some of the activities of the department? We've done a lot of great work with Microsoft, with AWS, with other groups. And how do we also start to create an advanced engineering group that can help us test and scale new technologies before we put them into practice? And so we've looked at a number of ways to leverage, like speech to text, text to speech, form recognition to determine how we could speed beneficiary determinations and so forth. Third area is on enterprise architecture. And it's now that we've inherited all these technologies at the department, how do we define a future state, reduce duplication, and leverage a good data model for what exists, and where we really need to create better standards for what we're leveraging at a cabinet level agency. So been there a couple of years, it's been fascinating, but I guess I'll stop, Oki, with just this journey through government was never meant to be this long. It was never meant to be this diverse. I think the thing that that has always been served me really well, besides maybe some luck and serendipity, is just keeping an open mind, looking where those opportunities are to make a change in the culture or to do a turnaround, and never saying no when they tapped me and said, Sanjay, we want you to come here, be the executive director for innovation. Sanjay, we want you to be the director of digital operations at the Department of at FDA and HHS. Sanjay, we want you to be the user experience person at Health and Human Services. Sanjay, we want you to be the deputy director for communications and campaigns at tobacco. And now we want you to be the CTO or Department of Labor. It's been a very interesting journey, and I encourage everyone to really keep in mind, especially if you're considering public service, not to get pigeonholed necessarily in a title or an area. Rely on your strengths, and it's worked out really well for me.
Yeah, you know, being in inside a government myself for close to 20 years is very rewarding. And you brought back a lot of memories. I thought you were perfect inside the CTO's office because you always put people and mission first. You can innovate starting with technology, in my opinion. And I think that you did well was that you were able to cultivate coalition, meaning you were able to lead by getting people to jump on board, because sitting in headquarters, it was very difficult to do anything because you have to convince CMS, CDC, NIH, FDA, all the operating division to jump along. So I thought that was a challenge, and also measuring, using data to measure success. I thought that was critical in anything that we did. And this perfectly aligned with the question that came up from the chat here around health data. This is from Matt. With so much misinformation and disinformation, especially around health issue, how critical is it to our government agency to have vetted, legitimate, transparent data available to the public?
It is absolutely crucial. I mean, I don't know if there's a lot more to say than that, but I think it's absolutely crucial. I've given some talks, and whether you're looking at the open data we're pushing out, or if we're doing simple business intelligence dashboarding, to looking at large language models, to really get into data and see what we can possibly do. Everything syncs back to the data, and the insights that come out of it are inextricably linked. And the government has a lot of bad source data, and I mean, we're constantly fixing it. But again, I think the departments recognize that data is probably one of their top assets, but we have to do more to ensure that there's that alignment. I think it gets back to even ethical AI. One thing you're seeing a lot in government now is, how does it affect your safety and your rights? And if you're doing something, how do you make sure that it's that the source of data is delivering the right value, and how it's being applied is doing it correctly? And so, like labor, we've set up a partnership with Stanford, and where they've done a lot of responsible rights areas, and we're creating a number of approaches and guidelines to drive responsible ethical AI and ensure that we understand that it's not having unintended consequences. But to your point, it's vital that we have that, and that we're constantly ensuring that we're putting together both policies and approaches to our data.
Yeah, and OMB is pushing hard on the open government plan in terms of sharing information to public. And going back to your point that a lot of system owner thinks the data is theirs, not the agency's data, and so they tend to kind of hold on to it without sharing it. I think there's a deeper issue around that. I think data classification and data cataloging and indexing is so critical, because if somebody's asking for data, people could just be behind HIPAA, so to speak. But if you classify the data correctly and index it, then you could say, okay, this doesn't fall under HIPAA. We could share this information to the public. This one's under HIPAA, so there might be some more strenuous requirement in requesting it. So I think that gets back to the IT perspective. I think that could help as well. Just being a better custodian of data ownership, I think in the government could help. There's a question from the chat. I'm gonna skip everything, Sanjay, because I think I'm a little biased with this question. It's from Jamie. From your perspective, what is Microsoft doing well, and what could we be doing better, differently to help government on mission delivery?
It's a good question. I want to be mindful here because I think that this is I think this is fair for any of the work that we're doing. I'd say doing well. As we've worked with Microsoft, they've been extremely good partners. We've got partners and account execs that we work with, and they've been very responsive and supportive in how we're driving our work. I'd say so no issues there. I'd say the thing that I often will talk about, and I think it applies to Microsoft, but also others that we've worked with, is really understanding the mission focus, meaning that we get into these discussions, and I just had some with a few other vendors too, and we're going into, hey, this is a technology capability, this is what we're going to be able to do, this is what we've started to enable. We've got, we're now got these mesh capabilities, these other things that we're now being able to integrate with these other partners, and that's really good. But the agencies that are looking at and are accountable at the end of the day to their up the chain, to the politicals, to the agency directors, they all first and foremost want to start with, how does this help advance the mission? How does this help to advance these 4 or 5 secretarial priorities that we have to drive forward? And so as we often will sometimes sit down and go through things, and we start with, okay, here's some pain points we have. It starts to trail back to the what the technologies can do without really understanding like where this could help push on the mission side, or where we saw that unemployment insurance or these areas are really vital. We've taken a hard look at your strategic plan. We've looked at where you guys are putting out where you guys are currently putting your investments, with your leaders are saying are priorities. This is where this could really help to take you to the next level. And I unfortunately, we get so much on the technology side that we're not often able to marry that up. And then I think that sometimes that's when the corner changes. Like, you've got a problem and we can help you fix it. And here's how this is how it's going to help really drive forward your administration's priorities. And I think that's key. I mean, government is risk averse, it's slow at times, but the one thing that I've seen every single new leader come in, they're often just looking desperately at, okay, I've got problems, and these are probably my top 5 problems, and I need somebody to help me fix it. And then they gravitate towards those who can help them do it. And that goes for both the federal staff as well as the contract staff that are able to help them to navigate and don't even make them think. Already got it solved for you. I remember when I came into HHS, and I was, I was so successful when Trump's group came in that at one point I had 3 senior executives as my boss. I was only used to one prior to that, so now I've got these 3 senior executives that are now part of the CTO's office, they were all really pushing for we've got this new OMB requirement that's come out from the administration to see how do you reform government. And I won't go into who the vendor was, but I remember sitting in one of the politicals' offices, or 2 of them, and like a document was dropped on the table, and it was an unsolicited proposal for how to solve that problem. And it was beautifully laid out, and I saw their eyes light up. And Sanjay, we're going to redo this meeting, but the next day they were already setting up, they are setting up contracts and getting this work done, because there was limited time, and it was basically, here's a mission need you got. We've thought through it for you. And I think they had only been there like 2 days, and this is dropped on their lap. And so you can imagine what motivation they have to make sure this one gets through. So anyway, I hope that's helpful, but that's just my perspective. I'm sure there's a lot of perspectives on this.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's very informative. Another question from Scott on the chat aligns with kind of my next question. So I'll ask Scott's first and then I'll ask mine. Scott said, thank you for your service to our government and our country, Sanjay. DOL has such an important mission now more than ever. What excites you most about everyday work at labor and impact you can see that is occurring?
I will say that they're twofold. I'll take it first from the mission side. So when I came in, there was I think it was the largest case of white collar crime with the unemployment insurance. So besides DOL getting unemployment insurance, and they pass it out through the states to administer it, then you had the pandemic unemployment insurance, which came out, and with that was this huge case of fraud and abuse, where you had individuals who were, you know, they found a huge amount of where people were putting in claims that weren't accurate, where, you know, prisoners, double billed, cross state billing. There was also outside entities that were getting large amounts of this. Some states were going quickly, and it was going to the wrong individual. Some states slowed down on it, and people weren't getting the work that they were looking to do, and weren't able to pass out this really needed funding that impacted their lives. So the administration came in with this heavy focus around how do we look at fraud, how do we look at equity. So if you're looking at people who are getting unemployment insurance in places where they can't do ID validation, or it's just a very unpleasant experience for them to go online to try to apply for this stuff, they're just going to abandon that whole process. How do we fix the equity issues? How do we fix the timeliness issues for folks who aren't getting anything? And again, this is impacting people's ability to be able to bring food home to the table in those areas. And so coming in with that was like really exciting around. We had the U.S. Digital Service come in from the White House. But how do you sit down and look at getting your arms around the issue, what the user experience is? How do you balance this huge infrastructure where you want to respect state rights at the same time? Each state has its own approach to how you do this in legacy systems and so forth. So I think how we look at those kind of beneficiary activities and the work that's going on there has been really interesting. You know, this administration also came in with looking at how do you advance good paying jobs and fair wage rates and so forth. So the ensuring more occupational health and safety, and so the list goes on with that. So that stuff keeps you really motivated around where DOL touches people's lives, and it pretty much is anybody who is seeking work, is working now, wants to retire with dignity, and so forth, and all these benefits that they can go in and apply for if you're working in a mine, or if you're getting somebody's your husband's a thief, your wife's a thief, and you aren't getting those benefits. So that's a real driver. I think the other exciting thing is where technology can be an enabler. When I came to labor, I know there were some initial concerns with the leaders around AI, artificial intelligence, and these emerging technologies. It's going to take away jobs, and we're now trying to get jobs. We're the jobs group. And what I did was I really tried to match strategy to situation where I heard the deputy secretary at the time talking about, we want to augment and improve workers' experiences. We want to be able to help them shift to more customer service and more empathy, and these things that would help us to be a better delivery of services. And so again, really putting on kind of my communications hat and kind of maneuvering hat, I really balanced all of our work that if we're going to do artificial intelligence, at least initially, we're really going to be looking at workforce empowerment. And so if I'm doing claim determinations and it's taking me a significant amount of time because I'm looking at fraud and a number of other data sources, we ought not be spending all this time doing stuff that when you talk to the staff, they're like, I wasn't hired to do this. Why am I going to multiple data sources and assessing past forms and everything else when we could bring these forms in, run some natural language processing and machine learning against them, and then through piloting and testing, get it to a point where 50% of the work can be picked up by the model, and people are then empowered to then look at to focus on the areas they need to focus on, validate things, and speed things out much faster. And again, workforce empowerment. So navigating that has been really interesting, but I do see that AI is going to be playing a larger and larger role. There's as you look at how it can be used as an enabler, where we need to mitigate it, how we need to ensure there's responsible AI, and all those other components with it. The ability for technology to really enable some of the work that we're doing, as well as all the stuff we have to be careful about, I think is just really exciting right now, and in the federal sector.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think AI could play a major role in labor empowerment. The next question is kind of two questions, kind of tie into one. Do you work with OPM at all? I know OPM's been thinking about using AI to vet applicants in terms of trying to get employment with the government. And second question, kind of tied to that, is that let's say if you have unlimited budget, that's never going to happen. But what is your vision in terms of innovation with DOL?
Yeah. So on the first one, we do work with OPM. I don't have anything where it's a direct engagement right now. I have worked with them in the past. I would say that when you look at where automation and AI can really have a huge role done right in the workforce, I think is really crucial. And I'm looking, we do a lot with our HR department and leveraging automation and AI, but with OPM, we haven't necessarily, to my knowledge, had that intersection yet. I'm sure there's some tangential engagements there. One thing I really am wanting to advocate at Department of Labor. I was trying to advocate this at HHS before I left, but I worked with an individual who was over in the Defense Department, and he said, "Look, and this was a handful of years ago. We're looking to train up our workforce, but not just the folks who run AI. It has to be everybody. If everybody's going to be so touched by these technologies, by both data, AI, and so forth, that we are pulling together training, whether it's for the entire workforce, and if they don't get it and understand it, whether it's at how it's going to impact their lives, how they might leverage this or leverage a contract that's available to do this stuff, the contractor's making determinations on who is the best, the most fit to do this kind of work, the individual is actually doing the hands-on work, we are not going to be able to deliver our mission. I think it's really important that we do that. On innovation, Oki, I think the core thing for me is to look at where does it create value. And I remember when I went to Health and Human Services and I joined the innovation group, and they created a space for the group. And I remember first walking in there the first week, and they had they had stuffed animals all over the place. They had a bunch of big piles of stickies, markers, a ton of whiteboards around the room where you could do some of these design thinking things, bunch of clay and Play-Doh to do. They were really trying to get that look there. And I remember one of the cleaning staff walking by, and she just kept looking in the window. And I said, come on in. What's going on? And she said, is this a nursery or where you guys keep your children? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, what is this? Like, it looks like a nursery or a childcare. And I said, no, it's not. It's actually a real office. And we chatted for a few minutes and she left. But I will tell you that a lot of folks really do look at innovation as this place where you can do some creativity. When we would run these Ignite accelerators, we'd bring in people from the different mission organizations. They'd come in, get 3 days worth of design thinking. Almost inevitably, every single time they came in with a major problem and they thought they had the answer, after 3 days of getting the training and interviewing customers, they'd come back and say, we had it all wrong. We absolutely were putting money and resources against something that was not going to see the light of day. And so they would go through this 3 months of training, working on a project, getting support on lean startup and design thinking. They get back to their office and their middle manager would say, hey, I hope you enjoyed your fun. I get that you're bringing back a great idea, but back to work. We're doing it the old way. We had so many instances of that. Sometimes you have to reach up to the leadership, Francis Collins at NIH or other luminaries and say, look, we need you to really support this stuff. I mean, this is coming from the secretary's office. So I think it's just really important that when we're looking at innovation, that I mean, the way I define it is how we, create the delivery and sustainability of new customer value. And I think it's important, it's new customer value. And we put it into use with a sustainable business model. And I think you have to have some of the parts of those equations for this to be effective. And so if somebody's bringing something in, where does it create that new approach, that new sustainable value? And then how does it fit within the agency's business model for how we do work? A great example is we were at one effort that we had was the Food and Drug Administration, the Centers for Disease Control, and Global Health at HHS tends to put people out on these put people out for these global positions across the country because we have to regulate or look for infectious disease or whatever across the globe. None of the HR systems were linked up, so you would get people from FDA coming back saying, "Okay, I've done my tour, I'm done," and you had other people who were coming back because their tour had ended, and they were like, I want to do that again, but they couldn't do it for, I forget what the reason was, that they couldn't go back out again and do it at that other area. And they're like, okay, this whole pool of individuals that we could be tapping for these hard to fill positions, and none of it's integrated. And so based on just interviewing the issue, why this was becoming such an issue, we were able then to determine not only, hey, this could create new value, but then could we make these systems talk to one another? Would the policy support it? As something we could sustain, both its feasibility, but also its cost affordability. And so that to me is like, and you might say, well, it's not that innovative, but it really was an innovation for how we could get the global workforce out there and keep this stuff running.
Yeah, I love the passion. And we definitely need more leaders like you in the government to kind of bring that passion and energy. Because people think of the government as being antiquated, but having, you and all the leaders out there, that's exciting. Andrew's coming off the is coming off the mic, so I'll turn it to him. There's a question on the chat too. I don't know if we have any more time on it.
Yeah, we'll try to get to it, of course. Well, first and foremost, wow, Sanjay, what a journey, right? It's amazing. And thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for doing such a great job moderating, not missing the questions in the chat. And thank you for your service as well. I know you spent a number of years in public service too. So thank you both so very much. It's like, if anything I've learned, listening to Sanjay's journey is that, he was like zero focused on the mission, but at the same time doing what he is kind of, capable to do, which is tech enablement, mission focused, tech enablement. Combine those together, I mean, you get, I guess, a recipe for success. It also kind of echoes all that, people, process, technology stuff. I think we very often focus on the technology as technologists ourselves, but it's the people and process that actually makes it all work. And I think at the very beginning of your talk, Sanjay, you mentioned accessibility and usability. Well, yeah, I mean, we often get kind of enamored with like, technical features and some cool stuff that we can do with machine learning and data, but ultimately it's of zero value to the public unless it's accessible, including people with disabilities, and usable, in a kind of, easy to consume way. And we have all sorts of consumers, some are elderly, some are young, some are more capable, some are more familiar with computing technologies, some are less. But I mean, we're kind of aiming to give that information to all. And agencies that you have mentioned as part of your journey, I've been posting in a text window, their missions. It's heartwarming to see. It's all about the welfare and the health of our nation, of our country. I mean, it is amazing. So thanks again. So I think at this point we're kind of moving towards closing this out, but we still have the open mic and Q&A. If you guys don't mind like sticking around for another minute or two, if people want to ask questions, it's very simple. If you want to speak, raise your hand and we'll unmute you. I think we have one question that possibly we have missed. I think, Sanjay, you mostly answered it, but I certainly don't want to be disrespectful. Paige asked about your DOL stint clearly DOL is very data-focused organization, so they developed a data maturity model of some sort. And Paige was asking, like, if you ran into any sort of culture and people-related issues, and if so, how were you able to overcome?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the health and human services in that my two observations at labor. One is that everybody wants to leverage data for greater insights and to make better decision making when they're dealing with their day-to-day stuff, and just keeping their core things going. It becomes a bit more of it's a bit of a larger lift, and you get less attention. And people get really, and when you do start some of this stuff, they get frustrated by the quality of the data. We just went through a great exercise. We're creating this tremendous amount of data around our Office of Apprenticeship, and the data quality issues was super frustrating for them, because you have to take time to clean it. It's not that you grab the data, suddenly you put it up and everybody's happy. You have to look at the data source, you have to integrate it, you got to run the use cases, and then you've got to figure out the data quality stuff. So I think those are reasons why sometimes it's like, hey, that we want to say we like it, it's important, but then when it comes to, let's create space for it, let's create the dollars for it, sometimes gets a bit it can be a bit inhibitive on that front. The other thing is just also the ability to share and integrate data. There's always those concerns around, if we start integrated, it creates new PII, and what are we not able to do, and again, you have to work through a lot of that, the data usage elements for us to even get to that willingness then to bring it together. So there's a lot of structural barriers that get in the way.
Definitely. Well, great answer. And I think we also have a question from Peter that came, later on in the talk. Peter, I enabled your mic if you want to ask it yourself. If I don't hear from you, I'll, read your question by all means, but at least want to give you an opportunity. Going once, going twice.
Sure. So,
all
sure,
right.
I had to find the mute button. Yes, I want to ask you, Microsoft and Labor have been such great champions of small businesses, but we've seen recently a lot of work has been going to the largest. So what is Labor doing, or yourself, to ensure that small businesses stay included in some of the innovations like AI, ML, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I can only just really talk from my perspective. I know that from our contract side, they very much favor, and we've got certain requirements to set aside things for small businesses. I personally am very open, and the core goal is and some of this is dictated by our contracts office, but make sure that we've got the open competition, and that we are targeting things towards both small and large businesses to do this work. But I've had great experiences with that, and over my career, and there's a lot of benefits in that regard. So philosophically, I mean, to me, it's an important thing to do, and we continue to do that.
Thank you.
Of course.
That's a good point. Yeah, we definitely want, more small businesses mixed into it. And sometimes it's like, set aside, contracts that, favor small businesses. Sometimes maybe it's joint ventures, where a large platform company, partners with a small business that is more agile and able to deliver those services kind of at the accelerated pace, while the larger company focuses on the platform itself. So it's very interesting space, I think. Any more questions from anybody? I already see requests about OK Sanjay Part 2. So guys, we may have to schedule this, a couple months from now again. Rematch. People seem to love it. And then trilogy, of course, after that. All right. Well, in that case, we ran a little over, but I mean, we often do when we have a very exciting, dynamic, and interesting presenters. Well, thank you, distinguished guests, for gracing us with your presence. And thank you, everybody who took the time in their busy day, even after work, to participate in this. This has been recorded. We're going to process the video. It's going to be posted on the Meetup YouTube side. And of course, we're looking forward to seeing everybody a month from now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.